Before we dive in, here's some real talk. If you're a leader, entrepreneur, or builder of anything, there's a whole stash of free tools waiting for you at papernapkinwisdom.com. We're talking mindset, strategy, clarity, no catch. Just ask. You can even hit the link in bio and grab what you need to move forward faster.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 290. Think about this. Every leader, every entrepreneur, every difference maker eventually finds themselves staring at a wall. That wall might be a problem that seems too big to solve, a setback that feels too heavy to carry, or a moment where the easy option is simply to stop. But what if that wall wasn't a dead end? What if it was an invitation? And that's exactly what today's guest, Andrew Safnauer, brings to us with his napkin. Andrew has lived this theme again and again in his career. And here's the thing. He's not talking about ignoring problems or pretending they don't exist. He's showing us how we can approach the obstacle in front of us defines the story we create. You'll hear him unpack the ways resilience gets built, how creativity changes the game, and why leaders must model grit so their teams can see what's possible. As you listen, ask yourself, what's the wall in front of me right now? Am I turning back, or am I finding my way over it? This conversation is going to challenge you, inspire you, and remind you that the wall isn't the end, it's part of your path. Let's dive in. Andrew Safnauer, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you here today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you shared an interesting paper napkin and story with us, and I'm looking forward to digging into it. Your paper napkin was find your way over the wall. Why did you share that with me?
It's funny. It's ended up being you find a theme in your life as you get a little older. I think early on you don't really have an idea of what your life theme is going to end up being. And at this point, I've done a number of things. And when I look back at a common theme, find your way over the wall has been one that's come up again and again. And really, to me, that means when I get to a problem, it doesn't turn me around. It's really trying to find my way over, around, or through that thing. And I didn't think that was all that unusual. I thought most people went that way. But the more I've talked to people and gotten around things, I see people end up hitting the wall and moving, not moving forward with the dreams or the things they want to do, because you're always going to hit something, right? No matter anything you've done in your life, I'm sure that you really wanted, there's something where you go, oh, well, this is too hard to get through, or this was too difficult, or this, I don't know the way through this, or I don't know the right person. I don't know who to call next. And it's persevering and doing it and keep working through the problem. And when I've had things happen, I can use an example of, I founded an apparel brand back in 2014. And I know you can't tell by my snazzy outfit, but I've got no fashion sense. And I didn't know anything about retail at that time. And so when you've got to figure out a way to, I had a friend of mine who came with an idea for a piece of apparel, a swimsuit. And, I didn't know anything about retail other than I worked it when I was in high school, and apparel other than buying it. And so we had to solve our way through a lot of things. How do you even start when you want to make something? And starting from that point to the point where it's manufactured and it's sold around the world, it's a long road, but it's a solvable thing.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot that you went through really quickly. And one of the things that you said right away is you had this common theme of always hitting something. And then you said, well, you included me in the conversation, but I think everybody has been in that place where they run into something. And isn't it true that a lot of people just say, oh, it's a sign, I shouldn't be doing that. But you're taking it another way and finding your way. And you use this word in your napkin, finding your way, find your way over the wall. I think in the finding your way, you learn something. And that learning is part of what you need on the other side of that wall, isn't it?
Yeah, curiosity is one of those things that comes up again and again. And I'm 53, and I want to go to bed smarter than I woke up every day. And I don't know why that's been my thing, but I've always wanted to figure out a way. If at the end of the day I don't feel like I've grown and learned, it's kind of been a wasted day for me. So with the finding my way over the wall, it's being curious, being open to learning from other people, asking questions, and continuing to push things forward. Yeah, you reach a point where I think I found when we did the apparel brand that I would come to a closed door. For example, when we wanted to manufacture,
Hmm.
it was hard to manufacture. I'm in the U.S. Manufacturing in the States in the mid-teens, and still nowadays it's challenging. There's not a lot of places that do cut and sew, which is what that's called to get things manufactured. And I kept getting no. We don't want to talk to a new company. We don't do it. We want big minimums. We want this, that, and the door just wouldn't open up. And so I remember saying to my partner, I said, we're going to find a way through this. It might not be through the door. It might be having to go through a window, but we're going to find a way through this and keep pounding at it until we've, called enough people where somebody said, maybe they felt sympathy for me, whatever, but somebody finally led me to figure out like, oh, okay, well, I've got a lot of little things that I talk about, and I want to find a sweater string to pull, right? When you pull on a sweater string, I'm looking for that one snag where I can find a starting point. And going through the window or whatever that was finding that sweater string to pull to move forward.
I love that. So I think also there's a sense of iteration in finding your way over the wall too, right? And there's a sense of the first thing you try may not work, and that's part of the learning. But there's also a resilience factor or a willingness to try again factor. Was that something you always had, or is it something that you learned along the way?
Along, I use the idea all the time that a toddler doesn't learn to walk the first time, right? They stand up, they fall down. If they don't try it again, they don't ever end up walking, right? We've all actually gone through that in our life, right? If you're walking right now, you've gone through that process,
Hmm.
even though it was a long time ago. So I have always been fairly resilient in trying new things, and it's funny. I had a long career doing media and voiceover. When I was a kid, I was in speech therapy, and so you turn from a starting point there to what it was a lucrative career for me for a while. So I've always found ways to work through issues from a very early age to now. So I guess it's probably always been with me. But I always tell people when they go, well, how do you get resilience? Well, it's a muscle that you have to try. Just don't give up in that first thing. Really keep pushing to push outside that balloon a little bit and see which way is going to work for you. It's not always born into people, but you can develop it.
Yeah, and I think it's just a willingness to give it another shot. So, you talk about you, you we were talking in the green room before beginning about traveling, and you live in a part of the world that I've traveled to go to, but you talked about a trip to Europe, which that you experienced for the first time
Yeah.
this year. We were talking about your name, Safnauer, and I asked you if you'd ever been to Romania, and you said no, but you went to Europe last summer, and you hit a wall on your way there too, right?
Yeah, that was funny. We my daughter graduated from high school, and for the trip, we decided to take a bigger trip. She's our youngest daughter, so we were kind of celebrating not only her but my wife and I. When I say being done, you're never done being a parent, but kind of the day-to-day sort of thing. And so we planned this trip to do a cruise out of Barcelona. And so I'm in Charlotte, outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, which is a hub for American. But you can't fly to a lot of European cities direct. You've got to fly to Chicago, New York, whatever first. So we flew to JFK. The flight from here to JFK was delayed. So when we landed at JFK, our flight to Barcelona had left. And so there were 38 of us on this plane that were supposed to be on that plane. And summertime going to Europe is very busy. So there aren't a lot of flights. And so we got off the plane and we're scrambling like everybody else trying to figure out how we're going to make up. It was a Wednesday evening. Our cruise left on Saturday. And we got off with a couple of people. And one guy got off with his bags and said, forget it, I'm just going home. I'm not going to make it. And we saw him getting in line, and we're like, well, that's kind of giving up a little early here. And so I'm on the phone. My wife's in line with American Airlines, and the guy said to me, "I got you a flight. You can fly from here to Heathrow to Barcelona. The flight leaves in an hour." Perfect. So we run over to that side to get our seats and everything. And we get there, and the gate agents say, "Sorry, the plane loads in 53 minutes. You need to be here 60 minutes before the flight leaves. So we're not going to issue you tickets." And so I'm with my daughter, my wife, and I were like, "You gotta be kidding me." So I call American back, and they said to me, "All right, we have no way to get you to Barcelona before Saturday." I said, "Well, that's kind of a problem. My cruise leaves on Saturday, so we're going to have to figure this out." And he said to me, "Well, I mean, the only thing I can do, I mean, I could get you to Madrid." And I said, "Whoa, that's over the water, right? I mean, like, okay, I'm at least over the water. Oh, is at the starting point. When can I get Madrid?" He said, "The flight leaves in 45 minutes. I said, "Now, can you get me guaranteed seats?" Not like the thing. He said, "Yes." So we run back across the concourse, get on the plane. And now we were in the back. I don't know if you've ever flown an international plane, but you fly like there's, you pass by the first class and the business class and the premium economy. And to get on this plane, we were at like row 48 and not together and the whole thing. But we said we are on the plane. We're going to get over the water. And that was getting over we just need to get over there. And when I land Thursday morning in Europe, we will figure out how to get to Barcelona. Now, Europe has amazing train systems, right? Spain, Italy have amazing train systems. So we landed in Madrid, and we're like, well, we're at least in the country. That's at least one thing we have. So we'd solved that thing, and then it was just a matter of figuring out how to get to Barcelona. And we went downstairs at the airport, and we found the train spot, the train thing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you got on the train here. You transfer at that station. You got on a high-speed rail downtown, and you'll be in Barcelona before 1 p.m."
Crazy.
And so we bought the ticket for 80 euros a piece and made the trip to Barcelona. So got into Barcelona later than we intended, but solved the problem, right? And so I think back to, it was funny, we got back here and our friends were like, "Thank goodness that happened to you," because like our friends know us as somebody that are going to work through problems. We're not going to hit the thing and go, well, like a gentleman that was leaving on the cruise and turned around and got a plane back to Charlotte. He wasn't going to deal with it. And we were, along with another family, the only ones that got on that Madrid flight and said, "We'll figure it out when we get there."
Yeah, and isn't it true? Um, it's interesting, and I'm sure the cruise was amazing, right?
It was great.
I'm sure the cruise was amazing, but isn't it true that our way over the wall becomes almost as interesting as what's on the other side?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Right?
It's
Like
funny
the
though.
story that you're telling is your way over the wall, not
Yeah,
about how great the cruise was. And I'm sure the cruise was great.
it was. But it's funny, when we look back at the trip, we don't even like, I would say when we talk about the trip to people, we don't highlight a lot of, let's say, we went a cruise out of Barcelona, ended up in Cannes and Florence, and did amazing things in Rome and Naples. And like the flight problem isn't even the highlight of what we would tell people about the trip. It was just a means to get us to the point where we wanted to get to. And so the solve was really probably, like our friends have said, are on brand for my wife and I, but it wasn't the dominant thing that when I think back on this trip, 5 or 10 years from now, it's a portion of the trip, but not the dominant part, which I really thought as we were going through it, like, what is it going to be like after this? But once you go through, it's kind of like entrepreneurship. When I left my job, when I was worked for a radio group in Atlanta, um, the chasm between being employed as a W-2 employee and working for yourself, it feels like a pretty big chasm. But then once you step through that wall, you realize it was really just it was a curtain. It always looks harder from the other side, but the other side is like, oh. And once you build that muscle up, you feel like I can do this again. So when you start exercising that, and when you come to something, the more you do it. And do I always get over it? Is it always successful? No, things happen, but I feel like the track record says when we get to something, we're at least going to try to make this happen and work through it.
And sometimes it's not about that wall in the end anyway.
No.
Right? Sometimes in not getting over a wall, but still making the attempt, still putting the effort, still trying to find your way, you find your way to the another opportunity, or you build the skill for the next time that you get that opportunity. So it's never really a setback, is it?
No, I mean, Jay-Z's got a song, "Dirt on Your Shoulder." It's, you kind of, you fall down and wipe yourself off and move forward. And I think that over and over again, you have to be willing to try and fail, just like a toddler trying to pull themselves up to walk for the first time. They fall, they fall, they fall, and finally they get it. And I think
Right.
if you can hold that mindset through things, there are so many better things on the other side for people that push through. You can live your life not trying to hit the wall, not trying to do the things, not trying to expand yourself and be smarter or learn or try that thing you want to try, whatever that ends up being. I'm not a thin runner guy, but I ran a half marathon a couple of years ago and never thought I would run a half marathon. Never thought I'd run a 5K. But it was a challenge that was put out there, and a friend of mine said, "Let's do it together." And you just push through that and do it. And it's really that simple. Like, you can do things. I think people say, "I can't do this, I can't do that." I mean, you can't walk to the moon, but you can change your job. You can move to Canada. You can do other things. You impose these things on yourself. So the wall to me is really saying to myself, "Yeah, I can do that," or I'm at least going to try.
Yeah. So you've applied this in your own entrepreneurial journey, right? And you talked about transitioning from being a W-2 employee
Yep.
at the radio station to apparel brand founder to other things.
Yeah.
All of these things seem completely unrelated, right? I mean, why did you move from one thing to like what takes you from exotic vehicles to swimwear and to everything else that you've done along the way?
So you told me before I started that we're okay with language, and
Yeah.
so I'm going to warn people ahead of time that I'm going to use one bad word here. And so if you want to skip over, you can. But my reputation among people is that I get shit done. And
Yeah.
so that's really a common thread through things. A lot of the things that have happened to me and for me, people have trusted me because they know that they can trust me to get things done. And so when I worked in radio, I was brought in to fix a group of radio stations in Atlanta. And I had worked in the rock format before that, but I was brought in to do hip hop and smooth jazz and gospel. And I really had no background in that, but that group had 67 stations and they were hemorrhaging money because they didn't have systems set up. So while I didn't maybe match the demographic of what it was, I could get things back to where they needed to be. And I did that for, almost 6 years. And I realized then that I wanted to do my own thing. So I went out on my own and built a studio and had people working for me. And we did a lot of great, cool boutique creative projects, audio projects. And then I had a friend of mine come to me with the idea of the apparel brand. And he came to me because he's like, "I have this idea and you're like the guy that I know that could probably get this done." And so I did. And that was really what that came to. So the common thread really is, to me, is solving problems. After the apparel brand, my daughter had an idea for an app when she was in 5th grade. She wanted to do a school newspaper. And there clearly at this point, even 7, 8 years ago, people weren't printing newspapers. And so there was no real app that did that. So we thought, well, can we make an app for that? And so we did. We hired a developer and we developed an app. It was on Google Play Store and the Apple Store and the whole thing. And didn't work. It worked. It didn't flourish. But we did it. So we solved it. So we walked through that. My dad and I owned a car dealership for a number of years and helped him with that and learned on the job with that. The exotic dealership came up because I was kind of I was doing some consulting work, and a friend of mine I'd known for 25 or 30 years and made some money in tech, and he had exited and had money and said he was flipping exotic cars kind of as a hobby and decided that he wanted to do it as a business. So he called me and said, "Hey, I would love for you to come and build the operation, set it all up for me. I trust you. I know you can get it done, even though you don't necessarily have experience in the exotic auto world." And so I joined him in December and stayed there through July, and it was great. So the thread really ends up being is that I'm able to get over the wall and solve problems for people, and collaborate with people to we find the right people to move things forward.
Now, when you're doing this, when you're solving problems and you get curious and you get involved, what's your first step? What does that step look like? Is it making an attempt, or is it something else? What do you do first?
Well, I mean, I always look at it like I know what the mountain I want to climb is, right? I can see it in the distance, but I'm not real sure what the path is going to be from here to there, right? So there's always been a goal for what ultimately what we want things to look like, and I kind of get what's given to me, take what's given to me. And I found over time that it's really just being brave with the first step. Now, it might not be the right first step, but I'm going to take a first step and think, well, I need to get to the mountain. I need to take my first step. What is that going to be? What do I have? What's the first? When we built the apparel, the swimsuit company, we needed a sample, a prototype. And so we said, well, I guess I'll go buy fabric and I'll find some seamstress to make what the idea is. And so I went to the fabric store and I bought some fabric and I went and, I went on Facebook and said, does anybody know anybody who sews? And somebody said, yeah, my next door neighbor likes to sew things. Perfect. And so I met her at a Starbucks and I gave her the fabric. I said, I want it to look like this and do this. And a week later, she called me and said, it's all done. And so I met her back at the Starbucks, gave her $100. It was the worst sample you've ever seen. Honest to God, it was terrible. And I thought, wow, okay, that was okay, all right, okay. But like I learned the process. Like I learned what kind of directions I needed and how I could short circuit that. So our swimsuits, essentially, if you're a guy that's watching this, you spend time at the water, you chafe in between your legs. And so what we did was essentially, instead of having a netting inside the swimsuit, we had like compression shorts. And so that eliminates that, but combining them together. And so we said, well, that sample's terrible. What if we just go and buy a swimsuit, tear the netting out, buy a pair of bicycle shorts and sew them in, and that'll be a good like example sample. And so, yes, it would have been great if I'd figured that out to begin with, but it took the first thing to figure out the second thing. And so it's really kind of, I'm looking for the sweater string to pull is what I do. I don't really have a process. When we started the exotic dealership, we had a couple things set up, but I knew what we needed to do operationally to get things going. And so it was finding people and getting a lot of the back end sort of software things together. And so I just kind of picked something and went.
I love, first of all, you said it starts with vision, and that's what people get really quickly. People understand that you got to begin with the end in mind and see that vision. But you said something else and you said it real quickly, but it's super important. And it was, you can't see the second step until you take the first step.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think a lot of people miss that part. Like, you have to almost have it in your mind that the first step is going to be what it is. And it's not necessarily going to be a great step. It's not going to be a perfect step, but you can't see the second step
100%.
and what you need for the second step until you've taken that first step, right?
You have to be comfortable with the unknown, right? And so that's the whole thing. It's like that Indiana Jones movie where he walked across that chasm with invisible stones, whatever. Like, you're going to take that first one and the next one will be revealed in some way. And that to me was just always like, when we were building the brand, I would meet someone and I'd be like, well, I don't know what's next. And then I would kind of think about it and talk to them and they'd say, well, I know somebody that does that. Boop, there's the next step. And you can't see 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. You still can see the mountain in the distance, but you don't know where it's going to go, and you're only getting a light shined, on the next step. And you have to be okay with that. It doesn't always line up the way you think it's going to line up, but you have to once again persevere to know that, okay, I've gotten this far. And then over time you've taken enough steps where the mountain's still far away, but you look backwards and go, wow, I've actually taken quite a few steps to get to this point. And I know way more now in the 20 steps I've taken than I did at the beginning. And I'm that much smarter and I can keep doing it.
Right. Does that mean that first step has to be random though?
Not necessarily, but I don't have I don't have, maybe I should have a framework to figure out what that is for me with the apparel, with when I ran the big radio group in Atlanta, it was, I realized they're losing money. Where's the biggest hit coming from? And solving that problem first. With the apparel, it was, I need to have a sample made. And then, you have a sample made, but then what do? And you start calling factories. So it was like, well, I had this prototype, and I was like, well, I need to find a factory. And I would call a factory, different representatives, Googling literally. Well, actually, yeah, I Googled factories and I just started calling places. And some people would answer, some people wouldn't. They would hang up. They would, I don't want to talk to you, or they wouldn't call back. And finally, somebody said, you need a tech pack. And I was like, okay, what is that?
Yeah.
So that's a technical pack to make anything. I don't care if you're making coolers or phones or glasses or whatever. That's what the manufacturer needs. Well, who makes tech packs? A designer. Once again, went to Google, apparel designers. And I found 5 one night, and I emailed them all in the evening, and one emailed me back. And I used her for 10 years. And so she was a great partner for that thing. So it was really just, once again, finance sweat. And every time, once we got that done, it was like, we need to find a factory. How do we do that? I have no idea. And so, you kind of understand the process of where I need to get the shorts and use. And there were times where I'd ask a question out of order, and they'd say, well, what are you talking about? You need to do this first. Oh, okay. And I think you do want to go against people that aren't necessarily nice to you. They'll hang up on you, or they won't help you. But invariably, if you say, look, I don't know what I'm doing. You're an expert at this. Can you just shed a little bit of light on this? I'm just trying to learn here. The vast majority of people around were like, yeah, okay, well, it needs to be this. Oh, you know what? Thank you. And people are willing to help. I've found that over my time that people are willing to answer. Most people I've come across are willing to answer questions.
Yeah, and I think that I love the fact that we're unpacking this in more detail, because what you're sharing is that by asking the questions and being curious, and also being really open to the feedback, asking for honest feedback, that gives you the opportunity to iterate. That gives you the opportunity to learn what could come next. That also may give you the opportunity to discover what is working, about like where the innovation is, where the neat idea is in what you're doing already anyway. And that might not always be clear to you. Isn't that true? And so the first step's important, but getting feedback and being open to listening for it is also critical.
It's hard because I think a lot of founders are very focused on what they want to build, and I think that's insanely important. I really do. Like, what you can't. They're going to, naysayers are going to say that's a terrible idea. It's not going to work, and that stuff you filter out. But you learn over time that what feedback is. You have to take it all in, right? And that's tough because people will say, "Yeah, the idea doesn't work. Nobody cares. It's stupid." Whatever that is. But you start to be better at hearing things and go, if you hear things a couple of times, I may investigate a little bit more to at least see if that's worthwhile. Is that a valid criticism of where we're going, or is that a valid path to maybe take from where we initially thought that was? And I don't want to get unfocused, but I want to at least be open to the idea that I've heard this thing. Faith plays a big role in our lives, and my wife's and my lives. And I would say that if I hear the same thing 3 times, I feel like I'm being led somewhere. So if I hear a thing a third time, I'm going to at least spend some time investigating if that's worth something. And I'll either dismiss it, or we could pursue it, or I don't like a lot of corporate isms, but I'll put a pin in it and say that's something that will be good to come back on at some point again and do something with it. So I do try to filter stuff through.
Yeah, no, and I like that. I like that you talked about that. So it's it's almost like you're validating a path to improvement with those with the feedback versus just hearing the criticism, right? It's not about criticism per se. It's not feeling discouraged by things not being right, but you're looking for a path to making it better. And so I have this one philosophy, and you like using these kinds of things. So one of them is make it bad, make it better. And in order to make it
100%.
better, you have to make it bad.
100%.
Right? Because you talked about your prototype being the worst prototype ever, but if you didn't have it, you wouldn't have had anything.
No, you've got to be willing. You hear this all the time from people. Just Seth Godin talks about just shipping it, and the whole idea is you need to get your idea out there at 80%, and you can always fix it. It's easier with software than it is with like a good like a food or clothing or whatever you spend a bunch of money on. But get the idea out there and then get feedback from the marketplace to make it better. I mean, what the product is, when I exited in 2024 was very different than it was in 2014 in terms of design and colors and a lot of different things that happened along the way, because you get feedback and you're like, okay, well that could make this better, but we didn't know that before. So,
Right.
there are things, and there's some criticisms like, oh, there's not enough colors, there's not enough this. I'm not really so worried about that. I'm worried about, is it the best fit? Does it do what we say it's going to do? What are the things that make it a better product for you to use? And that's where that's what we spend our focus on. And so that was the idea. But if we hadn't put it out there and had it 85% ready, it never would have been 100% 10 years later.
Right. Right. And so today, when you think about how you pay that forward today, what happens when people call you asking for feedback in the same way? I mean, you're obviously willing to play ball and provide direction, right?
I hang up and tell them to go. No, I've been very fortunate to have people along the way in a lot of journeys be willing to have conversations with me and give me the next stepping stone to walk on. And so for me, the opportunity to do that when people call me or talk to me or whatever else has been something that's been important to me. And I think my wife will say sometimes, you'll even, like you need to start charging people for this, that, or the other thing. And there are times where I've gotten engagements out of the whole thing. But for me, if I can help look, an early stage founder doesn't know what they don't know yet, right? So, and there's not an opportunity. But if somebody calls and says, hey, I want to make a clothing. I talked to us. She's just graduated from University of Arizona. I talked to her, I guess 2 weeks ago. Very smart. And she's got a good idea, but she's at the very, very early stage, prototype stage. And she just didn't know what to do next. And so to have a 45-minute conversation with her to give her 2 or 3 or 4 places to go from that call was insanely valuable to her. And it made, when I say I felt good, it wasn't that yay me. It was, I'm happy that she's like energized by the fact that she felt like she was at the wall and somebody said, look, this, and this will get you to the next step over the wall. And she was like, oh, okay. I've got calls to make. And so the feedback I got from her earlier this week was, I called about that and I've talked about that. And she said, I'm starting to find more strings to pull. And that's the whole thing is people did it for me. And I feel obligated. Look, it's not, there's no big secrets here. Like business, like there's people act like there's all these big secrets. It's being, persistent. It's being a decent person. It's ideas are part of it, but there's a lot of just digging at it and solving problems. And if you figured it out, why wouldn't you share it with others? It doesn't make any sense to me.
And it's also really important that people hear this part of it. It's one thing to have ideas, and you talk about ideas and iterating and thinking about different options.
Yeah.
But it's also important to take those options, right?
Execution.
And you didn't send an email to one designer to get the tech pack, right? You sent 5 out. And I have a sense that if you didn't get an email response from any of those 5, you would have found another 5. And that's the critical part, right? There's a bias to action that people need to remember. That's part of it. You have to actually take action. You can't just have these thoughts and feelings. You need to act.
biased action is huge. And I have a 22-year-old and an 18-year-old daughters, both daughters. And I'd say that biased action puts you in that, you look at how many people are out there. I said, showing up on time puts you in the top 10%, of people anyways, because people just aren't willing to do it. But have biased action, you start compressing that number even more, leaning into things. And for me, it was a matter of just, wanting to move forward with things. I remember when we came out with the shorts, we had somebody that we knew that in our circle was like, I had that idea, for what we did, Mary, because really we weren't like inventing, this wasn't like some sort of laser brain surgery. I mean, it was like, it was peanut butter and jelly. It wasn't that hard, and we're like, yeah, but there's plenty of, the world is full of great ideas. Go to any city that you're in, sit in traffic, and around you, somebody's sitting in their car with an idea, right? The difference is, and it may be a great idea, but the difference is someone somewhere had that idea and actually did the 5 emails. And that's the difference, bias to action. And that's that's success versus not success.
Right. Take action. I love that. Andrew, this is the time of the show where we pay forward gratitude. Just talking about paying forward earlier on. You pay forward the tools of your trade, the experiences you've learned. One of the things we paid forward was a paper napkin we received 11 years ago from John Rulin. So John Rulin shared a brilliant napkin with us. What you appreciate appreciates. And it was a message to send some appreciation out in the world. He turned it into a movement that was his book, Giftology. And he made a positive dent in the universe. So in honor of him, he passed away last year. In honor of him, we've started the practice and continued it since to pay forward some gratitude at the end of every episode. So who would you like to shout out? Is there anybody you'd like to appreciate today?
Well, I will tell you that I am better because of my wife, and a partnership in life makes life worth living. And without her support, I don't, I'm not where I am without her. So I can't, and people can roll their eyes or whatever, but I will say that she has been instrumental in my success. In terms of things within the last, really 12 years that have been impacting me. I'm part of a group called F3 Nation. And what it started out with in Charlotte was an idea for men to get together and work out early in the morning. But what F3 stands for is fitness, fellowship, and faith. And what that ends up being is guys working out together, but also building bonds with each other. Faith being whatever that means, something beyond yourself. It's not a Christian thing necessarily. It's beyond yourself. But the fellowship portion, men have traditionally not had friends that they can share things with. And the impact that organization has had on me and the men that I've met and led and worked with and led me through that has been insanely instrumental in getting me through the last 12 years of my life without question. So I would say with absolute gratitude to both my wife, Beth, and to F3 Nation, I'm not where I am without them.
Yeah, I can. For those of you just listening and not watching, I hope you watch just the Andrew light up talking about both Beth and F3 Nation. Thank you for sharing that with me. And thank you for joining me.
It's been great. I appreciate the conversation.
Likewise. What an incredible conversation with Andrew Safnauer. His napkin, "Find your way over the wall," is such a simple phrase. Yet it carries a depth of wisdom that leaders, entrepreneurs, and difference makers can return to again and again. Here are some of the key takeaways from today's episode. Obstacles are inevitable, but they don't have to be permanent. Resilience is not a trait you're born with, it's something you build through action. Creativity opens up new paths over, around, or even through the wall. Leadership is about modeling grit and persistence for those who follow your lead. Progress often comes down to not stopping when you hit the wall. Persistence pays. Andrew reminded us that walls are not the end of the road, they're part of the journey. How we meet them with creativity, persistence, and leadership defines not just our success, but the culture we create around us. Now, here is my challenge to you. What wall are you facing today? And what's your first step to get over it? Grab a napkin, jot it down, and share it with the world using the hashtag Paper Napkin Wisdom. If this conversation spoke to you, Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and most important, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can spread these small but mighty ideas that turn into big results. Until next time, remember, the walls in front of you are not barriers, they're invitations to climb higher. Make it a great day.